All right, welcome class. Let's get started. Today, we're going to dive into what I would argue is the single most important operational question in all of business. It's a question that really sits at the core of managerial economics, and it's this: how do we know, with mathematical certainty, if our firm is maximizing its profit? And I don't just mean earning some profit. I'm talking about achieving the absolute maximum potential profit. That is the fundamental challenge we're going to solve today. So, to really get our heads around this problem, let's use an analogy that economists absolutely love. I want you to picture your company's total profit as a mountain, okay? Every single unit you decide to produce and then sell, that's like taking another step up that mountain. So, the critical question for us as managers, as future business leaders, is how do you know when you've reached the very top, the absolute summit? Because think about it, if you take one step too few, you've left profit on the table. But if you take one step too many, you've actually started walking down the other side, and you're literally destroying the profit you've worked so hard to build. To find that summit, we have to learn a new way of thinking. It's a fundamental principle in all of economics. We need to shift our focus away from the big picture numbers, totals and averages, and start thinking about the very next step. In economics, we call this thinking at the margin. And let me tell you, it is such a powerful tool for making decisions because it lets us analyze the tiny incremental impact of every single action. And it's right there at the margin that we can see these two fundamental competing forces that decide our profitability. So first, let's define our upward force. This is the force that pushes our profits higher, marginal revenue, or as you'll always see it, MR. Now, as business students, precision here is absolutely crucial. This is not your total sales revenue. It's not your average revenue. Marginal revenue is the specific, extra income you get from selling just one more unit. So think of it as the revenue you make from the 101st customer, not the average of all 101 customers. This is our incremental gain. And now for the other side of the coin, the opposing force, the one that puts downward pressure on our profit, marginal cost, or MC. And again, I really want you to be precise in how you think about this. This is not your total cost of production. It's not your average cost. It is the explicit additional cost you rack up to produce that single next item. It's all the variable costs that go into that one unit, the little bit of extra material, the extra seconds of labor, the tiny bit more electricity you use. This is our incremental pain. So you see, every single production decision you're ever going to make in your careers, from deciding whether to keep a factory open for another hour to something as simple as baking one more croissant in a coffee shop, it all boils down to this incredibly simple yet powerful calculation. Is the gain from this next unit greater than the pain of making it? Is the marginal revenue bigger than the marginal cost? That's the whole game, right there. Okay, let's keep going. So when we bring these two forces together, the gain, MR, and the pain, MC, we discover this really elegant, logical rule. It's like a bright, flashing signpost that tells us exactly where that profit summit is. And this isn't some vague business gut feeling. This is a hard and fast economic principle with real math behind it. Our source material really lays it out perfectly clearly, right there on the slide. But what I really want you to focus on is why this works. Don't just memorize this for the exam. You have to understand the logic. It's a point of equilibrium. Just think it through. If the money you make from producing the next unit is even 1 cent higher than what it costs to make, well, of course you're going to make it. You're still climbing that profit mountain. But on the flip side, if the cost is just 1 cent higher than the revenue, you would never produce it, right? Because you'd actually lose money on that specific unit. So the peak, the summit, it has to be at that precise point where the last profitable unit was made, right before the next one becomes unprofitable. And that tipping point is exactly where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that specific profit you make on that one single next unit, it has a name. We call it marginal profit. And you can see the formula is really straightforward. It's just marginal revenue minus marginal cost. As long as that number is positive, even if it's just a fraction of a penny, you are adding to your company's total profit. You're still climbing the mountain. But the very second, this number turns negative, you've gone too far. You've started the descent. And this slide right here, this table, it just perfectly lays out the decision framework. This is the core of the whole concept. So let's just walk through it together. First row, if your MR is greater than your MC, your marginal profit is positive. The rational, profit-maximizing decision is always to produce more. If you stop, you're just willingly leaving money on the table. Now, second row, if MR is less than MC, you're in the danger zone. That last unit you made actually cost you money. It reduced your overall profit.
The only logical decision is to scale back your production, which leaves us with that final, beautiful, optimal state where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. At that point, there is no more profit to be made from the next unit. You've gotten every last cent of potential profit out of your system. You've made it. You're at the summit.
You know, economic theory is great, but it really comes alive when you see it in action. So let's make this real. We're going to apply this exact framework to a simple business case. I want you to imagine you're the manager of a nice little coffee shop, and you have to decide exactly how many of your fancy specialty croissants you should bake today to make the most money. Okay, so for our example, let's just say the price for these croissants is a stable $4 each. So when you're thinking about baking that 100th croissant, the extra revenue you'll get from selling it, your marginal revenue, is a nice, simple $4. Now let's look at the cost side of things. The flour, the fancy butter, the chocolate, plus the little slice of your baker's time for this specific 100th croissant, it all adds up to $2.50. That is your marginal cost for this one unit. So you're the manager, you're applying our rule, what's the call? The decision is a no-brainer, right? You bake it. Of course you do. Your marginal profit is your $4 revenue minus the $2.50 cost, which is a positive $1.50. That's an extra $1.50 in profit for the shop. You're still climbing that profit mountain. So as a smart manager, you keep going. What about, the 150th croissant?
Well, the selling price is still the same. People are happy to pay $4. So your marginal revenue for this 150th unit is still holding steady at $4.
But look what's happened to the cost. This is a perfect example of what we call diminishing returns, which usually leads to rising marginal costs. Maybe your main baker's shift ended, and now you have to pay a part-timer a higher overtime wage to make this croissant. That extra labor cost pushes the marginal cost for this specific croissant all the way up to $3.90.
So what's the decision now? Well, you still bake it. Yeah, the marginal profit is only 10 cents, but hey, a 10-cent profit is still a profit. That dime gets added directly to your bottom line. You've taken another very small step up the mountain. You are getting very, very close to the peak.
Now let's think about the very next one, number 151. The baker is deep into overtime now, maybe at time and a half pay, and maybe you're running out of space and have to use a less efficient backup oven. The specific marginal costs for this one unit have just crept up again. And right here, this is the tipping point. Your marginal revenue of $4 is now less than your marginal cost of $4.15. Your marginal profit is negative 15 cents. If you bake this croissant, you will actually lose money on it. You've stepped over the summit and you're starting to go down the other side. So the logical, profit-maximizing decision is to stop production right before this unit is made. Your peak profit is achieved at exactly 150 croissants.
Now, before we wrap up, I have to talk about a very common and very dangerous mistake. I see this error all the time from students on exams. And what's more worrying, I see it from actual managers out in the real world. Getting this wrong can lead to some really, really bad business decisions. So please listen very carefully to this next point. The big mistake is confusing marginal cost with average cost. Let's go back to our croissant shop. Let's say your average cost to produce all 151 croissants, so your total cost divided by 151, was only $3. A manager who's only looking at averages might think, hey, this is great. I'm selling them for $4 and they only cost me an average of $3 to make. I'm making $1 on each one. Let's make more. But that average number is hiding a really dangerous truth. It doesn't tell you that the last unit you made, that 151st croissant, it actually lost you 15 cents and made your total profit go down.
And this class, this is the key thing I want you to take with you into your careers. Averages are fine, for looking back at how the business did. But optimal, forward-looking decisions, they are almost always made at the margin. Whether you're deciding on an advertising budget, hiring a new person, or setting production levels, you have to ask yourself, what is the marginal benefit and what is the marginal cost of this next small step? That's where you're going to find your edge.
And I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on as you get ready to enter this modern business world. Our croissant example had real ingredients, real labor, and rising marginal costs. But what about a digital product? What's the marginal cost for a company like Microsoft to sell one more copy of Windows, or for Netflix to stream a movie to one more person? It's basically zero. So if your marginal cost is always pretty much zero, how can your marginal revenue ever equal it? How does that new reality change this golden rule of profit? That right there is one of the biggest economic questions of our digital age.